All right, guys, welcome back to another video. So it has been an absolutely crazy day in the gaming industry when it comes to layoffs, and it seems like the cutting down of the industry in terms of reducing the amount of people that are working in it, as we have seen layoffs throughout the entire day. And it started this morning with Sega and them canceling an entire game as well as announcing layoffs. And the game that they did cancel is Hyenas, which was that PvE multiplayer co-op style of shooter, which I actually did play a beta for this game, and I thought there was a chance that this was going to be one of those hidden gem styles of games that people really did enjoy. So it's actually a shame, in my opinion, that they have canceled it. And even more so than that, Creative Assembly, who obviously is a part of Sega, has, they say here, confirmed it will be making redundancies across the company. And this comes after they reviewed their gaming business, and they say, in response to the low profitability of the European region, we have reviewed the title portfolio of each development base in Europe, and the resulting action will be to cancel Hyenas and some unannounced titles under development. Accordingly, we will implement a write-down of work in progress for titles under development. And they also went on to say that they are planning to reduce its fixed expenses in Europe with a focus on cutting costs at Horsham, the England-based Creative Assembly, saying we will implement reduction of various fixed expenses at several group companies in relevant regions centered on the Creative Assembly Ltd. And we expect to incur one-time expenses related to the reduction of these fixed expenses. Now, VGC did reach out to Creative Assembly and Sega to see if they had any more information about the number of staff that were actually impacted by this redundancy. And they confirmed that they are making actually redundancies across the entire company. Now, the next game from Creative Assembly is Total War Pharaoh, which will be released on October 11th. The Total War series is a big series, so that's not surprising that they're focusing their resources in that and taking some of that, I guess, away from Hyenas and making sure that they are going to put out games that are going to be making them a lot of money. I think Hyenas could have had a chance to be successful at Sega, but there is definitely a lot of risk with a new game in that style. And it's kind of all really does go back to what we have been seeing and talking about in the cost to develop games in 2023 and the less amount of risk that companies are willing to take. Phil Spencer had an email that was a part of the Xbox leak, essentially talking about these big AAA publishers and the dilemma that they are in currently. If you're spending 200 million to develop games, or even if it's not 200 million, just a lot more money overall to develop games in the current day of gaming, these companies don't want to take those risks. So they go ahead with their virtuous cycle games. I always like to use that term because that was Jim Ryan's favorite term to use when it came to PlayStation, how he explained always releasing the same games, explained releasing The Last of Us with another remake, all of that type of stuff. So these companies want to stay within that cycle because it's a guarantee, or a bit more of a guarantee, that they are actually going to get some return on their investment with new IPs and new titles. It's a tough time right now to be a developer and a publisher if you're trying to put out new games. And one way around that is with things like subscription and Xbox Game Pass, which is why we've seen a lot of risks Microsoft has been taking when you think of games like Grounded. Had that paid off, and a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that people were able to try it within Xbox Game Pass. Think of like a Sea of Thieves, which was an awesome game that they had put out just before, I believe it was in Xbox Game Pass, or it was around that same time. And that game absolutely took off. That was another major risk. And I think people trying it as well in the subscription service later did help push it to the prominence that it is today. And they've also tried and failed games at Xbox Game Studios. Like you think about Bleeding Edge, which I'm sad that one failed because I actually really enjoyed playing that game. But that was one from Ninja Theory that they were allowed to try, failed, and then they moved on and continued with going on to Hellblade and or making Hellblade 2, which is what's in development right now. Now, back to Sega. They obviously are just looking at the fat, as I guess you could use to call it, although I don't really think Hyenas would have been one of those games that was just a terrible game based off of the beta that I played, but they're looking to cut that down, reduce their costs, and try to get more return on their investment. They say due to structural reform Sega's planning to implement, which will occur mainly in Europe, the company now expects to record a loss for the current fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2024. So it's all about investors. It's all about how this is going to look when they close out their fiscal year. So that was just literally one of the major firings and major layoffs and cancellations that we did see. We also saw some huge stuff here from Epic, and this one is massive. In fact, it's actually hit Mediatonic. Essentially, they say here they've laid off like the majority of their staff, but we'll go through what's going on here at Epic, or at least the numbers into the amount of layoffs there are. And this is directly from the Epic Games website saying layoffs at Epic. They go here saying, as we shared earlier, we are laying off around 16% of Epic's employees. And I think that rounded out to around 1,000, maybe a bit less than that. They say we're divesting Bandcamp and spinning off most of Super Awesome. For a while now, we've been spending way more money than we earn, investing in the next evolution of Epic and growing Fortnite as a metaverse-inspired ecosystem for creators. I had long been optimistic that we could power through this transition without layoff, but in retrospect, I see that this was unrealistic. So they're going ahead with the 16% layoffs. They say, while Fortnite is starting to grow again, the growth is driven primarily by creator content with significant revenue sharing. And this is a lower margin business than we had when Fortnite Battle Royale took off and began funding our expansion. Success with the creator ecosystem is a great achievement, but it means a major structural change to our economics. So, I mean, because it is such a huge game in the creator community, because it's probably one of the most watched games ever, people aren't paying attention to other products out there, and they have to not only invest in developing the game, making it better, the continuous upkeep of it, the servers, all of that type of stuff. They also have to pay the creators with the revenue sharing stuff, which again, here's what they're saying is leading to them having to make these layoffs because it is more expensive than they thought it was going to be. So that's 16% of their employees at Epic are being laid off. And one of the biggest ones hit here is Mediatonic, the creators of Fall Guys, which Fall Guys was very successful, if I remember, when it first launched, and for a while after launch. I think it was one of those games that really had a lot of hype around it, and it was just great for, again, content creation as well, and just for watching, and it was a fun game to play. And it says here that the mass layoffs conducted by Epic Games earlier today may have resulted in the full closure of Fall Guys creator Mediatonic. On LinkedIn, a number of employees at the studio have revealed that they were let go as a part of the job cuts. And on X, some have described the developer's fate as decimation. If we go here to this person here, who was a level designer at Mediatonic, and you can see has, I mean, the way that he's presenting this is funny, but the overall firing of people is unfortunate. Obviously, I hope all these people do land on their feet, but he has decimation in letters above his head there at the studio, and you can see the pictures there. And it goes on here to say, sad to say that I am one of the many people affected by the layoffs of Mediatonic and Epic today. It's been an amazing 11 years at Mediatonic, and I've loved working with these people so much. And they acquired Mediatonic in 2021. They say the following year, Fall Guys switched to free-to-play model and Steam to become an Epic Game Store exclusive on PC. Now, there is an update to the story. They say a spokesperson at Epic Games called the claims of Mediatonic's closure false. So it seems like a lot of people have been hit by this closure at Mediatonic, but the actual studio itself is not closing. And Tim Sweeney does mention that they are going to continue to invest in games, including Fall Guys. So it's not 100% sure how many people from Mediatonic have been laid off, but it does sound like it is a rather large number of players. And I guess the only thing I can think of as to why Mediatonic will get so hard is maybe Fall Guys, just the return on investment for a game, even though it is popular, it just isn't enough. And they're going to be taking resources and putting it really into the main moneymaker there, which is going to be Fortnite going forward, and really trying to expand more of that out. But that was another unfortunate hit there in terms of layoffs in the business. So this has just been wild in terms of the amount of cutbacks there's been in the gaming industry. You think about the Embracer Group with all the stuff that they have had to sell off and the cutting that they've been doing and the closures over there. Ubisoft a couple of months ago had a bunch of layoffs. You think Epic now and Sega, and we're probably going to continue to see this. It's hard times economically, so maybe we are hinting at here that we're heading into maybe like a gaming industry recession of some sort, where a lot of these companies are just looking at the writing on the wall that costs are increasing. It's way harder to make money back on these types of titles. Their profit margins just aren't nearly big enough, so they're really going to have to cut back on the amount of money they spend to develop these games and really focus on the stuff that brings them in the money, compared to more risky types of titles like Hyenas, I think would have been. So we'll see what happens throughout this industry going forward, and if we're going to get even less creativity from these bigger publishers and developers in terms of the games that are released. Luckily, there is the indie side, where if you really want to just try something brand new that probably hasn't been seen in a while or ever before, that's where you're going to be able to find that. And again, Xbox, I have to say, does a great job allowing the diversity of styles of games to be created. Even if the developer is known to create one thing, they allow them to go out there and try something new. And I think that's actually paid off a decent amount for Xbox in terms of the games like Sea of Thieves and Grounded that have done very, very well. But hopefully all these people land on their feet and the industry starts going back the other way, where it's hiring and that people are able to go out there and make the games that they love. Now let's jump over here, because as we know, when it comes to Xbox, Activision Blizzard, the reason they bought Activision Blizzard because of the mobile side of gaming. And here's just another example as to how huge mobile gaming is, and it is going to be when it hits Xbox, and how it's really going to help push them in terms of their revenues and give them more money to be able to invest in and continue to expand out their offerings and their business. Candy Crush Sega hit 20 billion in revenue. It just recently. It says here that Candy Crush Sega, the matching game played by millions on their commute, has reached 20 billion in revenue since its 2012 launch. King has said, adding that it would soon release levels up to 15,000 for the most dedicated players. So I mean, yeah, that's pretty much the point of this story here. 15 or 20 billion dollars in revenue, huge milestone, all going to be dumped into the Xbox ecosystem, where they're going to be able to take that money, offshoot it, continue to grow Candy Crush, but at the same time, probably take a lot of those revenues and invest it in the parts of the business that they're hoping to expand and hoping to grow. And one of those places will be in the creation of more mobile games. And in fact, there is a new mobile game that is kind of soft launched, as we see here from Clobril saying the Elder Scrolls Castles mobile soft announced by Bethesda Game Studios, similar to Fallout Shelter, where you're in control of your own castle and dynasty and oversee your subjects as the years come and go and families grow. Fallout Shelter, I played a little bit of that when it launched. It's one of the very few mobile games I actually tried out and thought was pretty cool. And this is, as you can see, even just by the layout of the game itself, it's essentially the same thing, but with the Elder Scrolls setting. So if you like the Elder Scrolls and you're more a fan of that over Fallout, then you may want to check this one out. But again, this is just more pointing towards the expansion into mobile games that Xbox is going into. I mean, everybody is really trying to go in that. Nintendo, PlayStation, and we've seen even Apple, they're even getting AAA games onto their phones. So if you're not a mobile gaming fan, like I'm not a mobile gaming fan whatsoever, it's the next little while, that's where you're going to see a major expansion from these bigger publishers, these bigger companies, in order to help grow their business so that they can continue to bring all of the great AAA stuff and all the great console and PC games that we get. And for Xbox to take the mobile side, grow it out, it's just overall, I think, going to help Xbox Game Pass and those big first party AAA games that we are going to be getting. Activision Blizzard is clearly going to help out with that a lot. Now, when it comes to the console sales, I think the Series X and S have done well this generation. They are selling decently, and they will be continuing to try and grow in Japan. And we saw that at TGS with the various announcements they made for Xbox Game Pass. And the reception there seemed pretty good. I think they did a great job with just giving a catalog of games that if you're somebody in Japan who sees what's now available, especially with like the Persona stuff and the like a Dragon games coming on day one, you're probably gonna your interest is gonna be piqued to want to subscribe and see what the entire service is all about, as there are tons of great games in there. And it seems like their work is paying off in terms of pushing the Xbox Series consoles in that region. It says Xbox Series X and S console sales have now surpassed 500K units in Japan. 9K consoles were sold last week, adding up to 285K Series S's and 222K Series X. It's the second best-selling Xbox in Japan, behind the 360 at 1.61 million units. So they're about a million off in terms of beating the 360 in Japan. And we're in 2023. They have many years to be able to go out there and try to beat it, which is continuing to push with more games onto the Game Pass service. But the other biggest thing of all is they have a studio like Tango Gameworks, which we saw Phil Spencer visiting them. We'll see what's coming out from them next. And if that's day one into the service and it's a great game, may push more Series X's and Series S's. So Spencer has talked about wanting to go back and create those great JRPGs, those great games like Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon, and get more of those big AAA Japanese style games exclusive to the Xbox ecosystem, and working with studios to be able to do that. If they can somehow get some of those games out before the end of this generation, they may have a chance of reaching those Xbox 360 numbers. And then obviously the other major thing is just continuing building out those third-party partnerships with companies like Sega and getting more day and date games into Xbox Game Pass. So we'll see what happens. I think they've done a decent job, and it was one of the main things that Phil Spencer talked about at the beginning of this generation that he did want to improve upon. And then we have this here, which is the continuation of the expansion of the Xbox ecosystem. If you have the Meta VR headsets, you are going to be able to now play Xbox Game Pass through these headsets, as it was officially announced that they have allowed this app to function, and you're going to be able to play the cloud stuff, streaming it on your headset via your virtual screen, which I think is a great addition. And the virtual screens in VR headsets are pretty cool. I've used them a couple of times. It makes you that feeling like you're sitting in front of a huge theater style of screen. But it says here, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, has announced that Xbox Cloud Gaming will be playable on all Meta Quest headsets starting this December. So if you have one of those headsets, or you're planning on picking up the Meta Quest 3, which I think just went up for pre-order or something like that, it is now you're going to be able to jump into Xbox Game Pass. That was one of the things when I started looking at these headsets. One of the first questions I had was, can you play Game Pass on it via the cloud? And now it's going to be available. So it's just the continuation and the expansion of the Xbox Game Pass ecosystem. All right, finally, if the last couple of weeks haven't been crazy enough for you when it comes to the gaming industry, from the Xbox leaks to Jim Ryan retiring / stepping down, to the ABK preliminary approval from the CMA, to what we've seen today with the layoffs, we have another huge thing today that has occurred, and that is Nvidia has been raided by the police. As Nvidia's French office is raided in cloud computing competition inquiry. What is interesting, as we know, Xbox has been giving their games to Nvidia, and now this is happening. So I wonder what is going on here. It says France's competition authority raided Nvidia's local offices this week on suspicion that the chip maker engaged in anti-competitive practices. Says the French competition authority, which disclosed the Dawn raid on Wednesday, did not say what practices it was investigating or which company it had targeted, beyond saying it was the graphics card sector. And the French competition authority said its operation this week followed a broader inquiry into the cloud computing sector. The broader inquiry revolves around concerns that cloud computing companies could use their access to computing power to exclude smaller competitors. And this sounds literally very similar to what the CMA was arguing with Xbox and Activision Blizzard, that they'd be able to use their power in the cloud and just kill competition from smaller companies, which is why they had to make all of the remedies that they did with that deal. And now this is happening with Nvidia. So the EU, Europe, UK, that part of the world there, they are very, very interested in making sure that there is no hindering of competition when it comes to cloud computing, so much so that they actually are raiding the Nvidia offices in France or potentially them engaging in anti-competitive practices. We will definitely keep our eyes on this because Nvidia did decline to comment. We'll see what comes out of this story as the days go by. But I will end the video there, guys. If you did enjoy this video, hit that thumbs up. If you are new here, hit that subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.